It seems there is an unwritten rule, and although I say unwritten, it's so prevalent it wouldn't be surprising to find it etched in stone somewhere, that games based on pre-existing intellectual properties have to be awful. The powers that be tend to lump games in with t-shirts and lunchboxes, merchandise that simply has to turn a profit, and for that to happen it doesn't have to be good, it just has to exist. But there is a subset of games based on pre-existing IPs that is generally pretty good. Games based on the IP's universe rather than on a specific product, like a film. Examples include Escape from Butcher Bay, Blade Runner, and Tron 2.0. All of those games are based on the general IP rather than on a specific product, and these games are much more often legitimately good games. In some instances, they are utterly outstanding games. So those of you groaning at the thought of yet another trite IP adaptation might want to stay a while and listen, because, like the above examples, Arkham Asylum isn't based on any particular Batman product, though it does share more than a few similarities with the Grant Morrison graphic novel, also called Arkham Asylum, and, like the above examples, Arkham Asylum is a great game. The game opens with Batman marching the Joker through the doors of Gotham's nuthouse, the Arkham Asylum, but the Batman is concerned that it was a little too easy to capture him. Is something going on? Well, yes, actually. The Joker, with the help of Harley Quinn and a small army of thugs, takes over Arkham. It seems the Joker has hatched a plan to have some fun, and Batman is at the centre of it. Aside from the Joker and Harley, Poison Ivy, Killer Croc, Bane, the Riddler, and Scarecrow also make an appearance. With these characters, especially Scarecrow, come some truly unforgettable moments. But perhaps the most striking thing about the story is in the sheer number of ways it's told. There are cutscenes, there's some light in-game interaction with NPCs, there are radio messages from Oracle, there are video monitors playing recorded messages, there are frequent taunts from the Joker over the loudspeakers, and there are audio interviews with some of Arkham's more colourful patients. The sheer volume of dialogue, which is all written wonderfully by veteran Batman task writer Paul Dini, far surpasses that of most other games of this type, and probably most games outside of RPGs. And it's one of the things that helps to keep the game so consistently interesting. But that's certainly not the only way the game keeps you riveted. Like several other great games, games like Half-Life and Escape from Butcher Bay, Arkham Asylum's gameplay consists of several disparate elements, and you're never doing the same thing for very long before you're doing something else. The pacing here is pitch perfect. The first gameplay element you're introduced to is the melee combat. Being highly trained in a billion combat styles, single enemies are no match for Batman, so the game throws enemies at you in much larger numbers. The fight that serves as the tutorial has you fighting 3 enemies, but later on you'll find yourself up against as many as 12 at once. Fighting is very fast and very fluid, as there's no locking on. You just press a direction and the attack button and Batman will do the rest. Although the Batman has a huge repertoire of moves, there are only 3 attack buttons: attack, counter-attack, and stun. So the actual mechanics of fighting are very simple. The challenge lies in the timing. You will have 2 goals in every fight. The first is to string together as many moves as you can, as a higher combo multiplier will earn you more experience. Experience is used to buy new abilities, but Deus Ex this game is not. It's not even Dead Space. There are 20 abilities, you can easily afford to buy pretty much all of them, and it's very obvious which are the more useful. It's a very undeveloped system, and they could have done a lot more with it, but the game doesn't rely on it or anything, so it's hard to criticise too much. Your second goal in every fight is to not get hit, as this not only injures you, it also disrupts your combo multiplier. Even though you're often surrounded, the enemies won't just charge you and all attack at once. They hang back cautiously and only attack when you seem vulnerable. This can in part be attributed to how intimidating Batman is, but it's also simply to keep difficulty levels reasonable. While that approach didn't work out too well in Assassin's Creed, which has fairly similar combat, it does work here simply due to the fast pace, which is more akin to that of Sands of Time, except with many more enemies. It's never particularly difficult, but the pace of the combat makes it hectic and crazy. 3 guys won't pose any challenge, but make it 10 and things get much more interesting. On normal difficulty, a symbol appears above an enemy's head to indicate that he's about to attack, giving you time to counter. But on hard, and I recommend you all play on hard, there is no symbol. Taking down all the enemies in a fight will never be a serious challenge, even on hard, but keeping that combo multiplier going, which will be your goal, is hard, but it's always a satisfying challenge, which is of course the best kind of challenge. And it's not just fun to play, it's also an impressive technical achievement. All of Batman's blows, which are appropriately quick, economical and brutal, land in a very believable way, and it's a true pleasure to just sit and watch the carnage as it plays out. My one problem is the excessive use of slow motion. The slow motion can be great when it's used well, but here it's used excessively and gratuitously. It's like being stuck in a fucking Zack Snyder film. Thugs with clubs are one thing, but when there are guns, you have to play the game very differently, as the Batman is far from invulnerable. Through his Cowl's detective mode, Batman is able to detect when enemies are armed with guns, and you'll have to get all stealthsome if you want to survive. Being a third-person game, you have the stupid, unfair advantage of simply being able to swing the camera around to see things your character has no way of seeing himself, something that completely undermines the tension of the act of hiding in all third-person stealth games. But Arkham Asylum takes this idea to a crazy level, as the Cowl's detective mode doesn't just let you see around corners, it lets you see straight through them, with the enemies showing up as brightly coloured skeletons. And the developers seem to be aware of just how impossible it is to reconcile that with conventional stealth gameplay, as you aren't hiding from the enemies quite as much as you are preying on them. Thanks to his grappling hook and thanks to the conveniently located gargoyles, Batman can avoid detection by hanging out up above. You can silently stalk these enemies and use your instant takedown moves to incapacitate them, or you can first wind them up a little using the fear mechanic. Enemies that see signs of Batman's presence, things like finding their unconscious allies or taking batarangs to the face, will become increasingly fearful. This is all well and good, and it conveys Batman's style appropriately, but there are absolutely no incentives to actually make an enemy afraid, as it has no effect whatsoever. Or if it does, the effect is so subtle as to be moot. And this all adds up to mean that the greatest problem with the stealth is also the greatest strength, that it really does make you feel like you are Batman. His physical and intellectual abilities so greatly surpass the typical thug, not to mention his technological advantage, that enemies just pose no challenge. The stealth areas become more interesting as the game progresses, as enemies wear suicide collars designed for the asylum's inmates that emit sound when they're incapacitated, alerting his allies. And later still, there are some hostages who are murdered if you're spotted just once, resulting in game over. But even these areas are never challenging thanks to the third-person perspective and detective mode. It's a thrill to wield the power of Batman and to hunt enemies rather than hide from them. But people wanting stealth akin to that in Thief or Escape from Butcher Bay will find EA's stealth areas very shallow and completely lacking in tension. Batman has plenty of toys to help him out in both combat and stealth areas, as well as while navigating Arkham Island. Batarangs can be used to stun enemies, while sonic batarangs can be used to distract them. The grappling hook and Batman's cape let you navigate the environment in diverse ways and are both lots of fun to use. Most of your other tools are essentially keys to let you progress. The game uses the Metroid template, meaning the game is set in an open world, but you can't get through particular doors until you have the corresponding item, with the items being things like explosives to get through weakened walls, or the Batclaw, which Batman can use to tear off otherwise inaccessible air vent covers. So despite the open world nature of the environment, the game is as linear as any corridor shooter, but the persistent world comes alive in a way corridors never can. Although you're usually simply told where to go next, you'll often have to find something, like a blood trail, and follow it. It's little touches like that, taking a narrative mechanic like finding out where to go next, and giving it a believable, gameplay-driven focus, that makes Arkham Asylum such a special game, and the game is filled with little touches like that. Perhaps the one great disappointment is the boss fights. They're very underwhelming and completely fail to pay off on the great setups the story provides. The way the Riddler is used is also disappointing. He's a great character, but he's very much in the background in AA, and it feels like wasted potential. He's placed a number of simple riddles for you to solve, which typically amount to tracking down an object and holding your detective mode button while looking at it, and a number of collectibles for you to find. Again, it's great that they took a computer gamey contrivance like collectibles and made it character driven, but it really kind of falls flat, and really it's shamelessly just used to pad out the game's lifespan. Speaking of lifespan, if you want 100% completion, you're looking at over 12 hours of play. A lazy play through the whole story, not really bothering with collectibles, will run you around 8 hours, but if you know where to go, and you skip the cutscenes, you can finish the game in barely 4 hours. It's not nearly as big a game as it makes you think it is, but to rush through a game like Arkham Asylum is to miss out on something very special. Arkham Asylum has several flaws, but it's also a game that is far greater than the sum of its parts, which are quite considerable in number. The characters, the pacing, the volume and quality of dialogue, some amazing, unforgettable moments, and the sheer wealth of things there are that you'll do throughout the game all add up to something that Batman fans should find impossible to resist, and everyone else should seriously consider trying out. It just might convert you.